will be.
I need the best.
I had the best words.
Well, I'm the best there is.
The best. We the best.
Have a chance to be the best of the best.
You are now listening to Best of the Best, presented by Radar Studios. Starring two guys who use their middle initial to sound cool. Here are your hosts, Neal E. Fisher and Mark P. Smith.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Best of the Best. We are excited as today we have a special interview with director and writer David F. Sandberg, who is known for his award-winning short film Lights Out, along with many others that you can find on his Vimeo page and YouTube pages. But most notably and most recently, director for the feature film Lights Out and the upcoming Annabelle creation, which comes out August 11th. So yeah, we have an interview with him today. It's pretty exciting.
Nothing more I can add to that, really. Just, take a listen and, enjoy the conversation. I think you'll hopefully get some cool insight on a up-and-coming director who's got big things on the horizon and has a really, a great approach to filmmaking. Still learning the Hollywood system, and it's kind of interesting. His take on kind of busting into Hollywood from his shorts is interesting. I think everyone can learn a little bit from it. So please enjoy.
There hasn't been a moment in my life when I haven't wanted to make movies. As a child, I would, when my dad bought a video camera, I'd start making shorts with my friends. So that was always the goal. Right. And I mean, the ultimate goal for me was always to get to Hollywood, but I wouldn't actually tell people that back home in Sweden, because it's well, that's crazy. That's such a pipe dream,
Right.
But I did shorts from an early age, and then when I got into my 20s, it started getting sort of harder to make shorts properly, to get friends together and all of that. So I actually switched over to animation for a while, because that was something that I could do all by myself.
Right.
So, you don't have to rely on anyone else.
Right.
And I had a little bit of a hit with a Swedish animated short in Scandinavia. It got some viral attention. This was in 2006, so YouTube was a pretty new thing. And that led to me getting some job offers of making little commercials or little internet videos for people with my sort of brand of animated humor. So I tried sort of supporting myself doing that for a few years, and also doing some documentary work just to get some sort of income. And that was for almost 10 years, I think. And then I felt that, what I really want to do is live action, genre movies, because I've always been a horror fan and sci-fi fan. And so I wanted to switch over to that. But it was kind of hard, because I hadn't done anything like that for 10 years. I'd only done animated humor, which didn't really show what I could do. And it was also a problem of, back in Sweden, you have the Swedish Film Institute and these various regional film centers where you apply for a grant. And that's basically how you get money to make films over there.
Right.
And they would turn me down. One of these film centers were telling me that I was too old. No, they were saying that I was too inexperienced to apply for sort of professional money. But then when I looked up their sort of rules, I was too old, because I was just a little over 30 by now. So I was too old to apply for the sort of beginner money. So it's well, what the hell do I do now? So eventually, my wife and we just started doing little shorts at home, because I had a camera, and my wife's an actress, and so it was let's just try and do something together for no money at all.
Right.
So we did a little short, and got some good feedback on that, and we're yeah, well, this is great. And then we saw online that these Bloody Cuts guys from England, who had been doing these really great shorts online, they had an online contest, like make a short under 3 minute and, you know, win prizes. And we figured, well, this is what we do now, so let's submit. So, and that's how we came to make Lights Out.
Interesting.
And we didn't make like the top 6 finalists in the contest, which was a little bit disappointing. But then I won the Best Director award, which was great. But we figured that was sort of it. You know, that was fun. Let's keep making shorts. But a couple of months after the contest, Lights Out just got a life on its own online and started going viral. And all of a sudden it had millions of views. And, you know, I was getting all of these emails from people in Hollywood who wanted to talk to me. And it was just
That's wild.
insane, you know.
That is crazy.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's wild.
Yeah.
As far as Sweden's concerned, I've always wanted to go there. It's on my list. But in terms of film, I know everyone, you know, in the United States, especially people in California or maybe New York or even here in Chicago, you know, going to the movies is a huge deal, and especially for filmmakers here, the industry is so big. But what's it like in Sweden? Is it more art centric? Like if you wanted to make genre films, was that looked down upon, or are they, you know, supportive of every type of film? What's it like over there?
I mean, since it is based on grants, which is, you know, it's government money really. So
Right.
usually it's sort of the films oftentimes have to sort of have some sort of, you know, importance to them, you know. So there's a lot of, you know, I think you're more likely to get money for like a drama about, you know, a family with problems and like alcohol issues and immigrants and, you know,
Right.
Those sort of, nothing wrong with those movies at all, but
Right.
but it's, you know, it's less commercial, which is great for that. Those non-commercial things get a chance as well. But to me, who's always liked, you know, horror movies and Steven Spielberg and stuff like, you know, very commercial stuff, it's harder in Sweden. And, you know, Hollywood so far has been more in line with that.
Yeah, it's funny because that idea of getting like a grant money or government money, at least in the States, is such a foreign idea to us. You know, because they do that in Canada too, and I know some Canadian buddies that like, yeah, we made a short film and you know, or we talked to you know, Neal here made a web series, directed a 32-part web series, and he's been talking to another group of filmmakers that made a web series in Canada, and they're like, yeah, a lot of it was, you know, funded by Canada. So it's so interesting to hear that, or, you know, to hear people from other places that have that, or maybe have that available, depending on, you know, the parameters or whatever. So going back to your
because I mean, if you have, I mean, if you are lucky enough to get one of those grants, it's great because there's, you know, there's no real expectation that your movie has to perform, or like they don't care if it makes money because it's basically, you know, you're given a grant, reason. It's free money,
right?
Yeah.
So growing up, you were saying you're a fan of horror and like sci-fi. Where there are like a lot of directors you kind of really were fascinated with, or movies that kind of struck a chord with you when you were younger, or?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Spielberg, but also sort of James Cameron, especially like, you know, Terminator and Aliens and Terminator 2, and, you know, all of his work, The Abyss. That was really something. And then when I got into my teens, and you know, Bad Taste came out in Sweden, and it was like that was the most amazing thing ever because it came out together with this documentary called Good Taste Made Bad Taste, you know, where you got to see how Peter Jackson basically made this movie for very little money over like 4 years, and it was like, that's who I want to be,
right?
You know?
Yeah, and I see a lot of that in your shorts, which is, you know, great for me too, because I, just like you said, often when you want to make something, you know, not everyone can come and help you out, you know, whether it's money or time or, you know, whatever it is, but you kind of have to think on the fly and go into your creative toolbox to make things happen, just like you did with your wife. And I'm curious to know, you said you had your background in animation, which has been featured in all of your shorts and features too. But as far as basically being your own DP, was that something that was just born out of necessity, or had you always been interested in operating the camera as well?
I mean, to me, that's how you make movies. Like, you pick up a camera and you start shooting, So that, to me, was movie making. And that was the big sort of adjustment coming here and, working on Lights Out, where it was like, at moments, it felt like, well, just give me the camera. Like, I know what to do. Like, it was hard to having to explain to people what I wanted because I'd never had to do that before.
Right. Yeah, well, I was going to ask you that, actually, a segue to a question I was curious about, like your transition from, well, first going back a little bit, when you made the Lights Out short, which on a personal note is like one of my favorite shorts, because I actually never have seen it before, and then Neal here had shown me. He just came to my room. We work at the same, I'm an editor here, so we work at the, in my suite or whatever, and he's like, man, have you seen this short? And I was like, no. We watched it, and I'm not really good with horror movies because I get scared really easily. My wife is like, she loves horror movies, and she's like, just staring at the screen, just loving every second of it. And I'm like, cowering behind a pillow or something. But and that made me feel like that. So hats off to that short. But I
Thank you.
I was wondering, what was the process like and specifically Lights Out, to all of a sudden, like, here's just 3 minutes short, which is really just like a scene, essentially just like a really cool, scary scene that then was like, hey, we're going to give you, we're going to give you this budget now. You're going to make a feature film. How was that like to then try to develop into like an actual feature with writing a screenplay, writing dialogue, like all that stuff,
Well, it was strange just because there was no we didn't make the short with an idea for a feature. It was just that silly little short we made for a contest. Right. So now it was suddenly like, what would the feature be? So at first I was in touch with this writer that I got in touch with when, I was talking to all these people here in Hollywood. Right. So I was talking to him, and he was like, he had an idea for it, but his idea was very big. So it was basically, it turns out to be a worldwide phenomenon with all these creatures. Oh, interesting. So it was a much bigger film, and I was like, partly that felt too scary for me to take on, like going from nothing to a big movie like that. I wanted to have something more contained, something with like just a family, and but also I figured that would increase my chances of actually getting to direct this, because who's going to give like a $50 million movie to a first time director, Right. So I basically, I had just gotten managers and agents over here, so I was talking to them, and they were like, "Well, what would you want to do? What would your idea be?" And I started writing that down and wrote like a little treatment for what I wanted the movie to be. And, my managers were like, "That's great." And then I sent it to this writer, and he was like, he wasn't as interested in that. Like, he could see himself writing it on spec if it was his idea, which he was more passionate about, but he wasn't as interested in this idea. So instead, by now there was a producer involved, Lawrence Gray, who knew Eric Heiser, and sent my little treatment to him, and he liked it and wanted to write it on spec. But to me, it was like, it wasn't really hard coming up with that first treatment, because I've wanted to do a feature for all of my life, and it's like, oh, now I finally have the chance. So it's like, okay, I want to. It wasn't really hard to come up with a feature idea,
Right. And what was the, I guess, in sort of transitioning to shooting the film, producing the film, what was it like, because in your short films, obviously, you're treating this, you're working economically, you're doing everything yourself with your wife, and now you're with a big team. Right. So how was that transition like to now say, okay, now I'm, all these people are doing everything that I actually did just by myself. And then in terms of directing the actors and things, like, was that a big learning curve for you to do that, or did it feel natural?
No, but it was tough because I mean, even back in Sweden, I'd never actually been on even a Swedish film set. I just, I've always tried to look at all these behind the scenes featurettes and stuff like that just to see what it's like on a set, because I'd never been on there, and I didn't know how everything worked over here. So when we were hiring all these people, the interview was just me asking them what their job actually is. Like, so what does a script supervisor actually do? And when I hired my first AD, I was like, so when do I say action? Because, looking at these behind the scenes videos, you hear all these things called out, like, sound speed, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I was like, okay, so I have to know when you're supposed to say action. Right. And, like I said earlier, like the big challenge was that I'd never had to tell people what I wanted to do before. I'd never had to explain myself. So I was just really unused to that. Right. And then it was also tough just because, working with this crew, everyone had more experience than me. They'd done these big Hollywood like blockbusters, like, oh, you worked on that one? You worked on that one? And there were a couple of people in the crew where it felt a little bit like, well, we're kind of doing you a favor, kid. Like, we used to bigger stuff. Like, you're new at this, which was kind of not great. Right. So it led to some arguments as well, like dumb arguments, like how cameras worked and like,
right. That seems so frustrating. So, I definitely empathize with that, because I look a little younger than I actually am, and I've been on sets before where if someone will come up to me and they're like, "Where's the director?" and I was like, "Well, I am," and then, I look like I'm in high school, so it's tough too to get over that hump.
When I think in this day and age too, I can imagine, like, here at Radar, we're we mostly work on commercials, but we do everything from production to post. We do visual effects, everything, and sometimes we end up getting bogged down in technical things, and because that's just the world of production now. It's not it's not film and everything. It's ARRI cameras, red cameras. It's codecs and frame sizes and whatever. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's necessary, but also it kind of gets in the way if you let it bog you down. Like for Neal and I, we're just like, how do we? We just want to shoot and like cut this thing and make a thing, so sometimes like I can understand on a sort of macro level what you're probably what you're experiencing in terms of transitioning to directing a Hollywood film.
And people often are surprised by things like this about like VFX or camera stuff, and I just found it super helpful. Right. I mean, especially with VFX, where you actually know what's really hard to do or what's impossible to do, or like how to shoot it to make things easier in post, so they can focus on what's important, and even doing some things myself as well, like VFX shots and a lot of temp stuff.
Well, that's what I loved about your videos. Your Vimeo page is just full of so much good information. I love following you on each short film, doing the behind the scenes, and two of my favorite things actually that I think you hit right on the head, which I think are really funny. In the behind the scenes of the Lights Out trailer, I love that you talk about doing some of these visual effects shots yourself and kind of saving the production money that they're too busy doing other things. They don't have the budget for it, and you're like, well, we could do reflective tape, and there's the practical effect, which I feel like people, especially nowadays, just because technology is so readily available, we
resort to digital.
Right, they resort to digital. We'll fix it in post, is the phrase that everyone says. And then I love that you do that. You talk about that, and I think the two things, I think it's in both of these videos or in that video that you say. One, directing really is seeing that bubble wrap that you wish someone would have moved, which is totally the right thing. Because anytime I look at anything I do, it's just like all I look at is the stuff that I hated on the day, that I missed. And then the second thing was when you were in LA and you said it was a good welcome lunch when you had lunch at a place called Gratitude, which I thought was really hilarious. So,
I mean, speaking of those videos too, I wanted to ask you, because I appreciate them, and I know Neal appreciates them, because you're giving some insight on, obviously the videos you made about the shorts and sound design and visual effects. What compelled you to? I guess the question largely is, there's not a lot of directors out there that will try to tell you how the sausage is made. Not sometimes they just don't want to do it. They just they're just like, hey, I don't want to, I don't want to keep it a secret for whatever reason.
Like a magician.
Or sometimes people don't feel like it's a value, and they just don't spend the time doing it. But in your case, you have all these cool pieces that explain this thing. What made you feel compelled to, once you started making these shorts, to kind of tell people this is how I did stuff? What was the thinking behind that? Just
because that's I've always loved that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I want to see.
Yeah.
And I can't get enough of it. There's if you've seen Every Frame of Painting, those videos.
Yep.
Every time a new one of those comes out, it's like, oh yes. I just want to. I love that, just sort of thinking about film and how they work and how they can affect you. If you do it like this, then the audience will feel this. Or just how it works and what you can do with it. It just fascinates me, and I want to sort of do what I can to share what I've learned. And
I was telling Neal, to me, that's kind of, I feel like you're one of the, and I could be wrong here, but I feel like you're one of the newer filmmakers or more current filmmakers that is taking that approach in terms of giving people the secrets, telling people stuff. It's sort of similar to what I think Robert Rodriguez did when he first burst on the scene.
Oh, yeah.
He gave everyone sort of a, here's how you do this trick, and here's, this is how I did this kind of thing. And
it's the 10-minute film schools.
Yeah, and I think that I think that's very endearing to filmmakers and fans, and that's probably why I feel like you have a great following, and why it's So I think just from Neal and I think we appreciate it, just seeing those things, because there's a lot of big directors or directors have been doing it a long time, that don't do commentaries, don't do any of that stuff, and it's like, come on, man, give me something. So I think it's cool that you take the time to do that, and from one filmmaker to another, I think we really appreciate it. So,
I plan to do more.
Yeah, we hope. Well, we can't wait to see Annabelle creation.
On top of that, though, just real quick, sorry, Neal. With these newer movies, though, you're making it in sort of the Hollywood system, we'll call it. And I know I saw your breakdown of some of the stuff you did on your own. You did yourself for Lights Out for the feature. Do they have a problem with you doing that, or is that okay? Or you know what I mean? Do they have? Is there some red tape in terms of how you are exposing how you did certain things, or is it for them? Is that okay?
Well, at first on Lights Out, it was when I was sort of planning the shots, I would say, let's shoot it like this, and then in post we'll just split screen it or whatever. And I would be told, well, that's a VFX thing, and we don't have that in the budget. And it was but I can do that myself.
Right.
And I was told sort of by someone that, well, VFX needs to do that. And, one of the examples from Lights Out is that school sign where it's I could have done that in 5 minutes in post, and instead they had to make a physical sign and hang up there and waste this time. But then I found out in post when I started doing these sort of temp shots myself, and the editor, he told me well, you can actually do that yourself, the finished shot, because we had people doing that on The Conjuring, because, unfortunately for VFX people, they don't have a union.
Yeah.
So, while you can't do certain things in Hollywood yourself, VFX is one of those things where actually anyone can do it.
Right.
So I started doing my own little VFX shots on Lights Out, where it was, and I did a few on Annabelle as well.
That's funny that you say that. I was about the union thing, because I was thinking about that. That was actually my interpretation of it too. Is I wonder if he's doing these because it's okay, because that's an area that's not, fortunately for you, and maybe unfortunately, I think, in maybe the greater terms for VFX artists, is that they don't have a union. So they are, so you can sort of impede on that a little bit, which I think is great for you too. And I think, having that knowledge, ultimately, just from your perspective, I think is, more empowering than anything, because what it takes to do that kind of effect or whatever it is. So I think Neal has.
Yeah, and then
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that like on Annabelle creation as well, there was a lot of like we had the script was really too long when we started shooting it, so we had to cut out a lot of stuff in post. So there were a lot of scenes when we were cutting it together. Like, okay, we really need a shot like this, or like when this person is standing there instead of that person, or whatever. So I would do a lot of those temp things. Just we take the actress from this shot, put her in here, or we do some 3D projection just to create a shot over here, and then we could go out and test that with a test audience, and then know exactly what we needed to shoot when we were doing like additional photography, because we had already sort of created VFX shots of it. So that's it's like invaluable when you're in post and you sort of can create your own little shots and like just try things out.
Right.
Now with I guess starting with Lights Out, being your first feature, I really loved. Mark and I both saw it in the theater first because we had been in love with your shorts, but we just rewatched it recently too. But I've just so appreciated, and I could be wrong here, but I feel like the one sequence or two of them that I really loved were the neon tattoo sign red light sequence when Teresa Palmer first sort of sees Diana or is interacting with her, and then the blacklight sequence. But it almost had like a Dario Argento vibe to me, which I love. I love like the Suspiria, like bright colors that are kind of taking over the room. I don't know if that was an influence for you.
Not that much. In fact, the neon sign was actually James's idea. So I had a scene like that I'd put in it, but it was actually the headlights from cars that was sort of sweeping across the room, and then James had the idea, like, well, let's put a neon sign outside, and you'll have that going on and off instead of these car headlights that sort of come across. So that was a great idea. No, I can't say, because to be honest, I haven't seen that many Argento movies. I've seen just a couple of them, but I am familiar with the aesthetic.
Right.
But when I was sort of growing up, I was watching a lot of other Italian horror directors like Lucio Fulci or whatever, even though I now think Dario Argento is better than Fulci.
Fulci's so entertaining, though. I'm a big Fulci fan as well. And I guess the question kind of leading into that then, too, is, you had such a great cast. Teresa Palmer is just awesome in the role, and, Gabriel Bateman's really good. But you got Maria Bello, who is just such a great actress, and all those scenes that are very raw between her and Teresa Palmer as far as the mother-daughter dynamic goes. What was that like?
She's very unsettling.
Yeah, well, she's unsettling, but she's so talented, and I'm just curious, like, getting on set that day and working with them. How did that go? How did that work out?
Well, it's a bit intimidating, just because it's like, holy shit, I'm supposed to direct this person who I've seen in so many movies. But my sort of directing approach is to not direct too much.
Right.
Like when you first start out, like you talk a little bit about character and whatnot, but then when you do your first take, you don't really give a lot of direction, because I first want to see what they bring to it, and then if things are too far from where I want it to be or where things need to go, we'll talk about it. But they made directing really easy, because they are professionals and they're really good, and they just go into those characters with such ease. So I think I was very lucky in that I got such great actors, because then I could focus on everything else really that needs to be focused on.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think about a lot of great directors will say, the casting is like the biggest part of it as far as directing acting goes, because once you got the right people, it's really up to them. Like there's not like that's what they bring to the table. You you hire them for a particular reason, like just like you would hire a director for a particular reason, and hopefully it's all it all just kind of flows at that point. But as far as just to sort of transition to Annabelle creation, how did that come about in terms of you getting involved in moving from Lights Out to that film?
Well, we were in finishing up post on Lights Out, and it had tested really well. Studio was very happy, so they came to me and asked if I'd be interested in directing Annabelle 2. And at first I was like, Annabelle 2? Is that what's that going to be? But then they told me about the script, and I got to read it and saw that this was something very different from the first Annabelle. It wasn't just the same thing one more time. So it felt like, all right, well, this is something I can make that can feel like it's more my own than just a straight up sequel to this other movie, because it's a prequel. It's a totally different cast, a different story and everything. So I was absolutely up for it. And to me, it was just not just the script, but also the fact that there would be a bit more money this time, and we'd actually be shooting on a soundstage because, Lights Out was all in location. And to me, the dream had always been to shoot on a soundstage, especially, we got to shoot on the Warner Brothers lot.
That's crazy. That's cool.
Yeah, because that's like how you imagine movies in Hollywood are supposed to be made.
Right.
And I remember when, after shooting Lights Out, I visited the Conjuring 2 set when James was shooting that. And, there was this big hole through the wall that they had sort of knocked out. And I was like, what's that about? And someone told me, well, yeah, James wanted the camera to move sort of through the wall. And it's like, oh, I wanted to be able to do that,
Well, I was, just a quick thing about Lights Out. I'm sure it's going to be the same for Annabelle, but I was just thinking, in your shoes, sort of, when I first saw it, and I was, knew your past and all the short films you'd made, and you share the same sensibilities that I do of kind of, if you can't get anyone to help you, just do it yourself. But just seeing that Warner Brothers logo in the beginning, fade away, I don't know what that did to you, but I know when I was watching, I was like, man, that must have been really cool, to see your movie with that logo in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Both the Warner and the New Line. New Line is.
Oh man, nothing more exciting to me than New Line, because that means either Nightmare on Elm Street was coming on, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or now like Paul Thomas Anderson film or something. So yeah, that's cool. That's a cool feeling.
I do miss the animated New Line logo though, with that little music.
Oh yeah,
they don't have that anymore since they became a part of Warner. It's really cool.
Maybe you can pull some strings and have them, bring it out of the cellar to put it on there.
Yeah, and speaking of New Line, and sort of in the Conjuring kind of universe, we did an interview with Lynn Shay, who's and her. I was just thinking this is kind of a cool tie-in because her brother Bob Shay started New Line, so. Sorry, it was just a weird tidbit that came to my mind.
Well, we talked with her about how awesome James Wan is. So what's your relationship like with him, and how did he, guide you or mentor, if it was that strong, throughout this process, from Lights Out to Annabelle?
Well, it was more on Lights Out than on Annabelle because, he's a really busy guy. So he wasn't always around on Lights Out, and I think on Annabelle he just came by 1 or 2 days or something. But he was, he was great. He knows the genre. He had a lot of great input, like the neon sign just being one of them. And his advice to me going into Lights Out was to just have fun with it, because it's like a weird, crazy business. And that was something I really couldn't do on Lights Out because I was so stressed out about everything. And I was like, this has to be a hit or I have to go fly back to Sweden. But on Annabelle, I was finally able to have more fun. It felt like, okay, now I know how this works. I know a little bit more what I'm doing. And,
right, you didn't have the world on your shoulders.
Yeah. Obviously, we haven't seen Annabelle. The trailer looks pretty awesome. Did you work on any visual effects on that, or do anything more than directing? And sort of obviously the obvious.
Just a couple. I did like 2 VFX shots, and then the title screen and the end credit sequence. I did that myself.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but no. Otherwise, Shade did a really great job with everything, so I was very happy with that.
I have to say, to be making a film within the Conjuring universe I think as far as horror movies are currently, I think that's like those are some of the most inventive and I think better, more quality horror movies being made right now. So I think that's like a cool thing, or at least
absolutely. And I think they have this sort of classic horror feel,
right?
Which was something I wanted to take advantage of in Annabelle as well, with it being a period piece too. To like shoot it a little bit more in a classic way, to have a little longer takes and like do,
more
really plan out
horror.
sort of the blocking and the camera moves and stuff like that, and not just, I'm something I've realizing more and more is how much I hate just standard coverage. Like, I do everything to sort of what can we do instead? Like how can we figure out something cool to do instead of just
close
normal
up medium
boring coverage.
Yeah, and that's the thing about that universe. I think you hit the nail on the head, which is what I prefer, because I came into horror appreciation a little later in life. My wife actually grew up as a horror fan, so she's kind of introduced me to all the classics. So I got to see like a lot of the great ones, sort of from a sort of a adult, more filmmaker perspective. And there are so many bad ones that get made these days, and to see this new crop of or like a movie like Don't Breathe or something, or like there's some really like standout cool ones that are being made right now, and I think it's cool that you're getting to work within that in that cool Conjuring universe too. So
Now, what did you shoot?
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say. So, what did you shoot Annabelle on, or was it film, digital, or did you with different cameras for Lights Out and Annabelle?
It was Alexis for both Lights Out and Annabelle.
Oh, that's great. And we were talking to Brandon, and we know he worked with you a little bit, and even he mentioned just the knowledge that you have that you came into the set with. That sometimes knowing DPs too. Some DPs work with directors who have everything planned out. Other ones need the DP to lean on a little bit. But he was very highly complimentary of of what you wanted to do and what you needed, and it kind of speaks to what you're just saying about, let's go to set, let's not think of typical coverage, let's try to think of, what else we can do, and I think it really shows.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell, when you watch a film if the filmmaker, at least I can, is making a conscious effort to change things up a little bit, because then you're appreciating a little bit more, and you're not kind of zoning out where it becomes the norm, or it's like muscle memory.
Yeah, and I think Brandon got to see the more organized version of me, since that was during the additional photography, and it was like, okay, this is my last chance. I better get everything I need. So I had like storyboards and stuff for that. But during the main shoot, when I started on Lights Out, I prepared like crazy. I did storyboards, I did animatics, I had all these shot lists and diagrams and everything. And then what I noticed was that rarely was what you shot, either because you couldn't, or you didn't have time, or you just came up with something cooler on set. So the way I sort of went into Annabelle was just to, I had an idea of all these things I wanted to do, but it was also like, we'll figure it out on set. We'll just talk about it. We'll just walk around and sort of come up with how to do it. And that was, the way we did it. And it worked out great.
That kind of like segues in the question I was thinking too, was when you Lights Out being your first feature and then following it up with Annabelle, were there like more specific things too, other than what you were saying, like getting shots and things, anything else that was like man, I did that on Lights Out, I'm not going to do that on Annabelle, or I didn't do that on I should do this, or any other like kind of tricks or anything that was like, I'm going to change my approach on this one?
No, I mean, it was mostly the shot list, and then, that sort of planning. And also, before Annabelle, I made sure to talk to Warner Brothers VFX and ask them, okay, so it is all right for me to do things myself, right? So I know that okay, I know how to shoot this if I can change things in post, or, fix it certain ways. And they were perfectly fine with that. So I went in with that knowledge that, okay, I know if a little thing needs painting out, or if we need to do a little split screening or something, I can do that myself. I'm allowed to.
And then I'm assuming you work with a VFX supervisor on these films, or is that something correct? And how is that process like? doing, kind of?
It's very easy. You have the VFX supervisor on set, but it's like, I would talk a lot about VFX with him, and he knew what I knew, so it was like, yeah, sure, like you know what you're doing, because I would hear these horror stories from other films he'd worked on where the director just will do these insane things and be like, well, you can fix that in post, right?
Right.
It's like I get a panic just hearing that, but because I know that I'm not going to do anything that crazy. I mean, I prefer to do shots in a way where I know that if I had to, I could do it myself, or at least I know how I would do it. I wouldn't do anything where I'm like, I have no idea how this would work.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. But if I can just one thing, I was just thinking about one of the shorts you were talking about, sound design, how important it is, especially in horror. I mean, sound is such a there's no other genre that's more important, and I think than horror. And as an editor myself, I appreciate sound design, and it's one of those things that like I try to build from the ground up whenever we're doing anything. I feel like those little touches add so much more, and they don't take up screen time. They just are subconscious. When you're working on these features, what is that process like in terms of sound design, and how hands-on are you with that?
I'm not hands-on in that. Well, I have supplied a couple of sort of sounds, but mostly just to show this is what I want, or this is in that area. But yeah, I'm probably pretty annoying because I'm very specific. No, that's the wrong sound, or that's don't put it, put it 2 frames later, or whatever. And that was actually something that happened on Lights Out, where I had our first sound designer fired, which was a crazy experience because I've never been in a position where I can have anyone fired before, and I felt like that sounds like a terrible thing to fire a person.
Right.
But then, I sort of learned that it's not that big of a deal here in Hollywood because it's all project-based and people get fired all the time and then just go on to the next project and they have credit differences. Doesn't seem like a big deal, really. Yeah, but because the thing was that we just didn't have the same sort of philosophy or approach to sound at all, because he was very afraid of silence. So if someone wasn't talking, or if there was a pause between 2 people talking, there would be like a dog barking in the background or car horns blaring, and it was like, no. and like there would be these sort of whooshing sort of sounds before scares, like whoop, so you felt it coming. So it was just a waste of time because he would spend all this time doing stuff, and then I'd spend time just rejecting it, and he'd have to redo it. So,
I'm sure
we had to bring on someone else.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people you work with too, and you probably are finding this. I'm sure they're probably like used to like, well, this is how we do it here in Hollywood. We do a thing that we put a dog bark here. And I think that's like I can appreciate you having the the forthright and the creative control or whatever to be like, no, I don't, that's not how it should be. It should, we don't want to we shouldn't, telecast a scare with a whoosh or something. We should just, we should just spring it on someone. Because I feel that when I watch Lights Out for sure too, like in terms of sound design.
Yeah, sound is so important, and that's, that's something I want to change, which is related to that, is how you work with music. Because, currently you cut everything, you make everything with temp music, and you test it with temp music, and then you sort of throw all that out and make new music.
Right.
And I really want to see if it's possible to just work more with the composer earlier on, so you can actually cut to what the music is going to be and all of that, because temp music is can be such a problem.
Yeah, and then you get
on Annabelle, we have I love the soundtrack to The Shining, so I used all of this stuff by Penderecki, who they used a lot of stuff for, this Polish composer that they used for The Shining, and I was worried the whole time, like, oh, I'm gonna miss this music so much, once we have to throw it all out, and then I'm talking to Ben, the composer, and I'm like, can you try and get it like really similar to that? And which feels kind of shitty to say to a composer as well, just mimic this instead of working on something from the start. So that's something I would want to try to do differently. But it seems that approach happens as well, because he was telling me that's how he worked on A Cure for Wellness, where he started making music before he had seen anything of the film, and they were sort of cutting to his music.
That's nice. Yeah, I feel like anytime Mark and I do something, you throw in that temp music, and then when you have to throw it out, it almost feels like anything new you put in there, it doesn't fit what you've already cut, and then you have to like restart and make sure that it's that it fits. Now, as far as on Annabelle, it's a pre-existing franchise. So was the studio strong on certain things, like, hey, the first one we did this and this, kind of stated that, or do they give you a little bit more freedom than maybe you had anticipated, since it was a character that had been on screen before?
No, it felt like it was quite free, because it's pretty separate from the first Annabelle, and there some people didn't have problems with the first Annabelle, so I think they were okay with trying something different,
That's great.
So it didn't feel very restrictive. The only thing was that I wanted to shoot it anamorphic, and they did not want that, because they were like, first they were saying that, we tried these new cameras on another show and we had all this problem, and I was like, well, these are just lenses, they're not new cameras.
Right.
And then they were like, well, we didn't shoot any of the other ones anamorphically, and that I couldn't really argue with that. It's like, yeah, that's true, but they were like, for the next one, you can shoot anamorphic.
Anamorphic looks great. Yeah.
Yeah, it always looks good.
What other genres? You said sci-fi. Do you have? Would you like to, I'm assuming, like, what are your hopes and goals in terms of, now you've got a couple films on your belt? What other things? What other genres you like to work in, or like work on? TV shows. TV's in some ways is really, really fantastic.
Yeah, no. We already, Lotta and I already have some TV plans we're working on.
Oh, cool.
Nothing I can talk about yet, and also I have this other movie coming up, which I also can't talk about yet, unfortunately, because they want to announce things the right way and everything. But I like all kinds of genres of movies. So I want to try different things, but I've always had a soft spot for horror and sci-fi in particular. So I'm sure that's something I'll return to over and over again, even though I want to try different things. Something comedic, perhaps, since that's something I did for a long time with sort of animated humor and stuff like that. I'm not sure I want to do animated movies, but maybe. I'm interested in all kinds of movies.
Yeah.
That's so great of a position to be in. I was just thinking about it. You're talking about kind of going full circle back to wanting to get to Hollywood, and people in Sweden saying that's crazy, and then you're at a position now where you have to tell people, well, I can't talk about this project. It's so secretive and under wraps. Like, that's so cool. You can say that.
Yeah, I know, but it's frustrating as well, because you want to talk about the cool stuff that's happening, or like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure Lotta appreciates it, and you get to talk to her. And speaking of her, I love that she was in Lights Out. It was just such a great nod to the short, and hopefully they didn't have any issues with her, being in the opening and a character in the film.
No, it was more a question of sort of where to put her, because originally in my treatment there was a character that was supposed to be her, but then that character sort of changed and became something else. So we were sort of discussing, like, okay, so where do we put her? And at first, Lotta and I was thinking maybe one of the cops at the end. But the studio was like, well, she doesn't look like a cop. And they were like, well, that's a compliment. Okay. So we actually talked, it may even have been the studio's idea to put her in the beginning to sort of tie it together, to be like a handoff between the short and the feature. So they were definitely on board with having her in the film. But which was cool. But we also sort of, it's kind of unfortunate that, we made Lights Out, the short, together, and I got almost all of sort of the glory, because we were. I mean, really, she should probably have been a producer on Lights Out, but we were so afraid to sort of push for things because it was like, well, then Hollywood will just take their ball and go home, and we have nothing, you know.
Right.
So like, let's not push too hard. Let's just take what they give us and make the most of it, and then fix it later.
Now with I guess, you know, moving forward, we know we have we've seen a lot of the ads for the Annabelle creation contest, the hashtag #MyAnnabelleCreation, and you know, you're kind of talking directly to filmmakers, but why don't you just, you know, talk a little bit just about that quickly, and then also you know, anything that you might want to tell to someone who's listening, because we know there's a couple people or a small group of people listening who are younger filmmakers who are kind of you know, taking any kernels of wisdom that people we talk to discuss. But anything, you know, for the contest, but then also anyone moving forward in your position, maybe just one camera and they have a friend and they're just making movies on the side.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the contest, I've been talking to New Line about various ways of doing something like this, to try to find new filmmakers and do short contests, because I think it's a great way to see what people are capable of, you know. And it came up, they suggested to me that, well, I mean, like, as promotion for Annabelle, why don't we do a short film contest with that? And I was like, that's great, let's do it. Unfortunately, it couldn't be worldwide, because they have to have, you know, the countries where the Warner affiliates have to agree to it, and there are a bunch of legal issues. So there's just a handful of countries now. But the U.S. is one of them, and UK and Sweden, among others, which is really exciting to be able to do something like this, and I hope we can do more of it.
Yeah, I think it's great.
But yeah, this contest is you make a 2-minute horror short, sort of inspired by the Conjuring universe. So, you know, kind of something that could live in that world or have the same sort of tone and feel. And yeah, it can actually be. I asked, and they're okay with like a few seconds over 2 minutes, so you don't have to be exact. But and yeah, you can win a trip to LA where you'll get a meeting with New Line, and you'll get to meet me, and yeah, which is really cool.
And that's myannabellecreation.com, I think, is what? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there will be websites for some of the other countries that participate as well.
Right.
Coming up, and they might have a little later deadline, since that has taken a little while. But yeah, and in sort of at the same time, I'm doing some little videos, just trying to give some short filmmaking tips about stuff like how we got our ideas to our shorts, and you know, importance to keep it short, and talking a little bit about scares and stuff like that. But yeah, the thing I keep, you know, filmmakers ask me all the time what my advice would be, and it's always the same. It's like, just keep making stuff, because that's how you learn how to make films. That's how you learn. That is how you get better, to just keep making it, and to not give up, because that's something I want to do halfway through every project. I just like, oh, this is garbage. This is never going to be good. I want to do something else instead. Because, yeah, you always, like, at least with me, I'm my own worst critic. So I always think everything's going to be shit, and I get all depressed. And I need some time to, you know, between me and the film, to sort of see that, oh, maybe it wasn't so bad. Because even with Lights Out, you know, I saw the first cut of that. Because, you know, once I was on the set, and you would look at the monitors, and you're like, oh, this is kind of cheesy and kind of lame, some of this stuff. And then you figure, well, this is Hollywood, so they probably, you know, in post, you know, they fix it and they put stuff on it, and it'll look really great. And then you watch the first cut, and you're like, oh shit, these things didn't get better. So now let's cut all of that bad stuff out, you know. But yeah, then you have test screenings, and you see that, oh, people actually enjoy this, so must have done something right. But yeah, I never think something is going to turn out good. and it takes a while before I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe it wasn't all terrible. So keep making movies.
That lets you know, you're doing
don't quit.
That lets you know
Yeah.
you're doing it right. I think whenever you.
Yeah, that doubt,
Yeah.
I guess, is
Yeah.
always good, just because
Well,
that
I
means
think-
you're still hungry and you're not getting complacent with what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if everything you did was like, oh, that's perfect, it's great. I mean, like, obviously there should be some things that you feel like you nailed, but I mean, it there's always, always room for improvement. No matter what you do, I think so.
Yeah, I've always been sort of weirded up at those people who are so sort of sure of themselves. I've seen that happen on film festivals where a guy's movie didn't win, and he'll go up to the judges afterwards like, well, how come my movie didn't win? Mine's so much better than that one. Or like, and I'm always like, well, what I make is shit. So it's like, I'm continually surprised when people say like, oh, the Lights Out short is so good. Like, when I first cut that together, I was like, yeah, I guess this is maybe something. It's like, it's not the worst thing in the world. And, then all of this happens. So you just never know how other people will respond.
Right.
One question we ask people, just kind of in line with our format, and I know this is a hard question. I probably would hate answering it myself, but we'll pick a particular genre. We did like time travel movies, or even more pointed, which was we did like 90s live action Disney movies. But if you had to pick your 5, best of the best films, maybe that inspired you, or that you keep rewatching as you're continuing on as a filmmaker, or directors, either one of those. But what would be your top 5 that continually impress you or inspire you?
Well, I mean, Aliens is a near perfect movie to me.
The sequel?
And,
The
that's
James
something
Cameron
I
one?
can watch over and over again. Yeah, James Cameron, Aliens.
Yeah.
And
We just talked about Aliens, actually, Neil and I.
Yeah, we just talked about how much we love it. And yeah.
We just recorded.
Yeah,
an
I was
episode
so
on
glad to
sequels.
actually get to see it on the big screen recently here in LA.
Oh, rad.
That's one of the things I love being here in LA, is that you can get to see all these old movies or like obscure movies you can actually see on the big screen.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
But also, like, The Thing has always been a big influence.
John
Raiders
Carpenter
of
is
the Lost
great.
Ark, of course.
Yeah.
It's like I can watch that over and over again.
Do you prefer Raiders
Village of
over
the
Last
Damned,
Crusade?
I really like.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, of course. Because they turned Marcus into such a bumbling fool in
We were having
Last Crusade. There's good stuff about Last Crusade, of course,
Yeah.
but there are some things where it's just like, I don't know. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark is almost perfect all the way through. Like, Belloc is like, I love him as a villain.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so great.
We were having an inter-office debate about Raiders and Last Crusade, and there were some people I think most people on the Raiders camp, but some people on the Last Crusade camp. So it was so that's the only reason I bring that up, since you mentioned Raiders. So sorry to derail you.
Yeah, no, and I was rewatching Temple of Doom recently, and it was like, wow, this has some really terrible stuff in it. It was like all the sort of racist Indian stuff, or like Willie always just screaming and being the most stereotypical sort of female film character ever. And it's like, that's
Yeah, it's a dark movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not one of Spielberg's best. I will tell you
It's so
that.
fun.
It's
I feel like
not my favorite.
The more important
in that.
things is what came out of it, because it's so funny. Because out of that movie you get PG-13. Spielberg marries Kate Capshaw and ended up going through his divorce, which I'm sure was kind of terrible. But it's just funny that it was probably more behind the scenes drama than what actually was put on camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, so I said 3 movies, right? And, wait, 4. Did I say Village of the Damned is one I really love from the 60s. There's so many, like...
I know, it's
Jaws
tough.
And, I'll say one that I do actually watch over and over, and I don't think a lot of people are really familiar with, it's Ripley's Game.
Oh, yeah. I know
with
that one.
John Malkovich and Ray Winstone.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just fantastic in that movie. They're the performances of those two. And that I think that was straight to video in the U.S. Not many people are familiar with it, because it's a sequel of sorts, or sort of in the to The Talented Mr. Ripley, which I wasn't a big fan of, but Ripley's Game is really good.
It is a really good movie. It's funny. It's such a long ago reference for me because so Mark and I both worked at a video store. I worked at Blockbuster, and I worked at Blockbuster around 2003. And I remember this movie just transitioning from the brand new to going on the shelves. And I rented it one day just because I love John Malkovich, and I just remember seeing it and loving it. And it was like one of those movies where you'd recommend to people, and they're like, I don't know if I want to see this one. It doesn't look that good. I've never heard of it, and you have to kind of push it on them.
Yeah. No, but I mean, especially for the performance of those two, like they're just so watchable.
Can I ask like a really silly like American question about Swedish culture real quick? Because you're the only Swedish person that maybe I've talked to in a long time, and that is obviously we live in Chicago here, and we have we have a lot of Swedish infusion. You know, there's a lot of people that settled here from Sweden, and we obviously have 2 IKEAs here. If we go to IKEA and I try to read those names, are those made up names or are those actually referencing something? Because I feel so stupid when I'm like trying to either pronounce them or trying to understand what they mean.
They are, but I've noticed. I think that some names here in the U.S. are sort of like they're Swedish words, or like. But some of them are not really. It's
right.
Like not a word. It's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, how should I explain that? Like,
I just didn't know if it was like marketing, or something, or if it was like if they were actually like, real words that were.
Like 90% of it is like just regular Swedish words.
Yeah.
But then you find some where it's like. I'm not entirely sure that's a word, but it sounds like I almost know what it means or like what it is. But so I think they're just running out of words, so they kind of have to come up with some weird things. But yeah, IKEA is really it's weird stepping into an IKEA here, and it looks exactly the same as back home in Sweden, and you read all this stuff in Swedish, and like you buy Swedish food, and so yeah, we go there all the time to buy some of the food and stuff we can't get elsewhere.
Well, it's funny. Speaking of IKEA, Mark just actually threw a question in my head. Maybe to wrap it up, but you're such a proponent of do-it-yourself filmmaking, and a lot of your videos on your Vimeo channel are about how you can make films on a budget with things from IKEA. Did they ever reach out to you and say, hey, make a video for us, or thank you, or we'll sponsor you? Because you use their stuff so well, and I would think that they would want to be a champion of you.
No, I actually reached out to them in Sweden, and it was like, hey, how about I do like a horror movie inside an IKEA store? Because it's like you already have sets, and like I can do these behind the scenes stuff about how I used everything, like how I built things with this and that, and they were just like, no. It's like, oh, all right.
Well, I think they'll change their tune.
Boring.
Change their tune now.
They should, yeah.
Yeah.
IKEA is the perfect place because your video on. It's your My Annabelle creation. I think it's video number 1. It's the idea one. You talk about something that I do. I think every filmmaker should do is if you don't really know what to do as far as set design or blocking, or location, just kind of walk around and let the outside world inspire you. But I love going to IKEA because they have so many different living rooms and kitchens, and it really gives you a nice idea of like a color palette, or do you want an island, no island, and it's great for storyboarding or coming up with ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just all the little lights and little things you can actually use in cool ways.
No, exactly. Well, thank you so much for
thank you so much for
spending the time with us, and
I can't wait to see Annabelle
got
creation.
some IKEA ads in there.
I know, right? Well, now they're going to have to support you because we've plugged them so much.
Yeah.
And then obviously we can't wait to see Annabelle creation. Is that August 11th? I think is that the
yes.
Okay. So yeah, we're looking forward to
and
that.
Next week on Wednesday, we have a bunch of preview screening in like 27 cities. The tickets just went out for.
Oh, I bet you we have it here in Chicago.
Oh yeah, we should look on that. I want to go see that then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there? I know you're big on Twitter and Instagram and everything. And where can people find you? I mean, I know where it is, but just to tell people where they can find you, maybe interact with you or watch your videos.
Well, I'm Pony Smasher in most places. So youtube.com/Pony Smasher, you'll find all the videos. And I'm also on Vimeo. And then on Twitter and Instagram, where I'm at Pony Smasher.
Where did that name come from, by the way? Because I know on your Twitter it says that you are not a smasher of ponies.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on Twitter it says I'm a certified smasher of ponies.
Oh, certified.
What's up? No, it was just since I got a YouTube account so early on, I was like, what is this YouTube thing? I mean, I just want to try it out and see what it is. So I didn't want to use my name or anything. I'll just write something silly. And then, yeah, everything took off, and now I'm Pony Smasher.
Well, I mean, you're wearing it as a badge of pride, so that's good.
Yeah.
Well, great. Hopefully people interact with you, and everyone will see Annabelle Creation on August 11th. But yeah, it's just awesome that you took the time.
Well,
All
cool,
right.
David. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was super interesting.
Cool,
yeah, real down to earth. Nice guy. It was great stories about the Swedish film industry, his influences, how he's dealing with things in Hollywood, and that was a nice mention by him too. That his wife Lotta was basically a collaborator with him on all of his shorts, and even though he's getting the recognition for the short films that's kind of led to his Hollywood career, that he still says, hey, she was a really strong collaborator with me on these, and was one of the reasons that they were so popular.
Yeah, and I think IKEA, you done wrong. You need to get on that collaboration.
Yeah, they screwed up.
This guy right here, David Sandberg, is on the up and up. And we can officially announce that, I guess at the time we recorded our interview with him, we couldn't really say it, but now we can officially say that he is the director for the new Shazam, another Marvel spinoff movie coming, I guess, in 2019. So that's pretty exciting for him.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and like Neal said at the top, go see Annabelle Creation. It looks pretty rad. I haven't seen it. Obviously, it hasn't come out, but August 11th, you can see it nationwide. I'm sure it'll be in some select cities before then. And also, he has it's worth mentioning they did a cool contest, a short film contest called My Annabelle Creation that Warner Bros. And him put together. The deadline for it was July 27th. So it's past now, but it's worth going on My Annabelle Creation. I think it is myannabellecreation.com. If not, Google it and see some of the short films people have submitted. They really want to use the energy, basically the kind of filmmaking past that Dave comes from, making these cool short little scary things, and kind of wrapping that into marketing the film and seeing what people make out there. So
yeah, and if you're in the UK, you have until August 7th. So. Yeah. You still have a little bit of time. If you can pull a shoot together quickly, then make sure you enter. Or if you're from the United States and ran out of time, like myself, then maybe just try to get a plane ticket, fly to the UK, film there, and then enter it.
Or go back in time.
Or, anytime you can go back in time is...
Whatever's easier.
Yeah, whatever's easier for you, depending if you have a time machine or not.
But yeah, David's cool. I'm really glad that he talked to us. So
yeah, and definitely check out his Vimeo. It's vimeo.com/DAUID. And you'll get to see all of his short films that have gotten a lot of notoriety. And most importantly, and I think my favorite part of them, you get to see the behind-the-scenes videos that go along with the shorts on how he did it, why he did it, and just that behind-the-scenes look that he talked a little bit about in our interview is one of the reasons I think he's so compelling as a new filmmaker, is he sort of pulls the curtain back and lets you see, the wizard behind there.
Yeah, and and he's on Twitter as Pony Smasher. Or you can just search his name, David F. Sandberg. You'll find him. But good follow there, too. So, hope you enjoy the episode.
Yeah, and reach out, guys. Let us know who else you'd like us to talk to. But we have some other interviews coming up in the near future that we're excited about. And look forward to bringing them to you.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We ask that you rate, review, and subscribe to Best of the Best on iTunes or your preferred podcast app. Have ideas for show topics, opinions, or just want to say hello? Send us an email to bestofthebestpod@gmail.com. Till next time, special thanks to Radar Studios and long live Don Hogue.